At 5:03 a.m., I watched a lab result appear on my screen. Positive for a hospital-acquired infection we were not supposed to have this month. Not on paper. Not with an accreditation visit in 10 days. I could have done the one thing my job pretends is automatic. Report it, flag it, start the chain that protects patients. Instead, my fingers hovered over a drop-down menu that would rename the infection into something present on admission. One click, clean wording, no alarm. In that moment, I realized the hospital didn't need me to keep people safe. It needed me to keep the story safe. And the worst part was how calm I felt deciding. There are stories we tell in public and stories we only tell to the people closest to us. Step inside the inner circle. My office is on the quiet floor, the administrative level that patients never see. No beeping monitors, no call bells, no families pacing with coffee gone cold. Just carpet that muffles footsteps and doors that close too softly. The kind of place where people speak in careful voices because they're always aware a hallway might be listening. I'm the clinical quality lead for infection prevention reporting. I'm not a nurse on the floor. I'm not a doctor at the bedside. I'm the person who turns events into data and data into a narrative the hospital can survive. When something goes wrong, the question isn't only what happened, it's what can be proven, what must be disclosed, and what will this do to the institution? I used to tell myself that reporting was truth, that numbers were clean, that my work protected people because it forced systems to face their failures. Then I learned how much a system can admit while still staying intact. We have dashboards, thresholds, triggers. We have weekly huddles with titles like safety alignment and risk review, and we have unofficial rules that no one writes down. Don't use loaded words in email. Don't speculate in charts. Don't give families information that isn't confirmed. Confirmed, in my world, means reviewed by legal. 10 days from now, external surveyors will walk through our hospital for an accreditation audit. They'll ask about infection rates, patient harm, transparency, culture. They'll nod, jot notes, request samples. They'll tour units with polite expressions and sharp eyes. Everyone pretends those visits are about quality. They're about reputation, funding, confidence, survival. 2 months ago, we had a cluster of infections in the surgical unit. It was managed, meaning it never became public. We replaced some equipment, reissued protocols, held a town hall-style meeting that felt like a confession with no actual names. Leadership called it a learning opportunity. I called it luck, because the truth is, you can learn everything and still decide not to say it out loud. My direct manager, Elaine, likes to say, "We're here to make safety sustainable." She says it the way people say a motto, like it protects them from the meaning. Sustainable safety, translated, means safety that doesn't bankrupt the hospital, scare the donors, or trigger headlines. I don't think Elaine believes she's lying. That's why she's effective. I used to admire her. Now I watch the way she edits language in real time, how error becomes variance, how harm becomes outcome, how responsibility dissolves into a fog of process. And I wonder when I started doing it too. The first call came from night charge before sunrise. Her voice thin with that particular fatigue that turns urgency into something brittle. "We've got a possible bloodstream infection," she said. "Central line, surgical step down. Room 412. Lab is running it now." "Possible?" I repeated, already opening the surveillance system. "It's the third febrile patient in 48 hours, she added. "The nurses are talking." Nurses always talk. It's how the floor survives. It's also how stories spread. At 6:30, Elaine texted, "Call me before 7. Not good morning, not update. Just an instruction that told me she was already bracing." I called her from my desk while the building warmed into daytime noise. Through my office wall, I could hear a printer spitting out policy packets for the accreditation team. Someone's laugh, too loud, too forced. Then silence. Elaine didn't waste time. "Tell me it's not another cluster," she said. "It's early," I answered. "The lab result isn't finalized. Do you have names? Yes. Do not put names in email, she said immediately. Not yet. I stared at the screen where the patient list glowed. 3 charts, 3 fevers, the same unit, the same central line kit we had switched to last quarter for budget reasons. I need to flag it as a potential hospital-acquired infection, I said, at least internally. Elaine exhaled slowly. We can't afford another potential right now. That's not how infection reporting works. It is how institutions work, she corrected. There was a brief pause that felt like a test. Then she said, Listen, the chief operating officer will be on the 7:30 call. Speak in hypotheticals. Keep it narrow. No clusters. No language that triggers mandatory external notification until we're sure. Mandatory notification is based on timelines, I said, keeping my voice steady. Delay changes classification. Delay buys clarity, Elaine replied, and clarity prevents overreaction. Overreaction. That word landed hard. I thought of the last time we disclosed a serious safety event. The press statement, the donor calls, the sudden scramble of leadership meetings that turned the hospital into a frightened animal protecting its organs. We can't not report, I said. Elaine softened her tone, which was worse. I'm not asking you to hide anything. I'm asking you to be precise. Be careful. Careful. Again. When the call ended, I sat staring at my keyboard as if it might confess. At 7:12, the lab pinged my system. Preliminary positive. At 7:15, I heard footsteps outside my door, 2 people stopping, murmuring, then continuing, as if my office was already part of a route. At 7:30, I joined the leadership call and listened to men and women with calm voices talk about readiness and confidence and messaging. When it was my turn, I said, We have a developing situation in surgical step-down. Early indicators suggest a line-associated infection. We are monitoring closely. Monitoring closely, not reporting, not escalating, not naming what it might be. I could feel my pulse in my throat as the chief operating officer said, Good. Let's keep this contained. Contained? Like a spill? Like a story? By midday, the unit felt different. Like someone had turned the lights down without touching the switches. I walked through surgical step-down with my badge turned outward, the way administrators do when they want to look official. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm plastic. Monitors chimed softly behind closed doors. A family sat in the corridor with a paper bag of food they weren't eating. Nurses watched me the way people watch a weather change. Are we doing swabs? One asked, too casually. We're assessing, I said. Assessing is what you say before you do nothing, she replied. Not hostile, just tired. I met with the unit manager in her cramped office. She had a stack of incident forms and the kind of tight smile that comes from being squeezed from both sides. They're asking me to stop using the word cluster, she said quietly, as if the word itself might trigger an alarm. I'm not even the one who said it first. Who asked you? I said, though I already knew. She didn't answer. She just tipped her chin toward the ceiling. Leadership, legal, the invisible layer above us. I returned to my office to find a calendar invite waiting. Messaging alignment, surgical step-down. Required attendees, Elaine, legal counsel, communications lead, me, 15 minutes, no agenda. The legal counsel, Martin, spoke first. His camera was off. His voice had the smoothness of someone trained to never sound surprised. Let's clarify terms, he said. We have preliminary data. We should avoid labels until confirmation. Elaine nodded like she hadn't rehearsed this with him. Communications asked, if families ask directly, what do we say? Martin replied, we emphasize vigilance, enhanced monitoring, standard precautions, no speculation. No speculation. No speculation in a hospital means no truth until it's safe. I said, The classification timeline matters. If these infections are line-associated and acquired here, we have reporting obligations. Martin's voice stayed calm. Obligations are triggered by confirmed determinations. We are not there. We will be, I said, and delay changes what we can prove. Elaine leaned forward. We are not delaying care. We are delaying language. It was a clean sentence. It sounded ethical. It wasn't. After the call, Elaine walked into my office and closed the door behind her. That alone tightened my chest. I need you steady, she said, as if I were a lever she could adjust. I am steady, I answered. She studied me. You're anxious. That makes you loud. I'm not loud, I said. You're principled, she corrected. That's good. But right now, principles need to be disciplined. If we trigger external reporting prematurely, we invite an investigation during accreditation week. Do you understand what that would do? To our reputation, I said, and hated myself for how automatically it came out. Elaine's expression softened in approval. To our staffing, to our funding, to the patients who rely on this place staying open. It was always framed that way. Survival as ethics. Then she added almost gently, I'm going to ask you to route all infection classifications through me until this stabilizes. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. That's not protocol. It is now, she said. I wanted to argue. Instead, I nodded, and I felt something inside me make room for the next compromise. The next morning, I got a message from someone who never messaged me directly, Noor, a new infection control nurse assigned to the surgical units. She was sharp, eager, and still believed policy meant protection. Her message was short, can we talk in person? I met her in a break room that smelled like old coffee and microwaved soup. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. A staff bulletin board was covered in cheerful posters about hand hygiene, as if reminders could out-muscle reality. Noor didn't sit at first. She set her phone face down on the table like she was bracing against it. I pulled line insertion records, she said. The kit change coincides with the fevers. The sterile drape is smaller. The field is compromised. It's correlation, I said automatically. It's correlation with bodies, she snapped, then immediately softened. Sorry, I've been on the floor all night. She took a breath. We need to halt those kits, today, and we need to document what we know before it gets rewritten. The word rewritten hit like a slap because it was too accurate. I'm documenting, I said. Noor looked at me in a way that made me feel suddenly visible. Are you? I felt my face tighten. I'm doing what I can inside the system. That's what people say right before they get absorbed by it, she replied. It wasn't disrespectful. It was frightened. Like she'd seen this happen elsewhere and was watching it start again. She slid a printed sheet across the table, photos of the kit packaging, lot numbers, notes from nurses about compromised sterile fields, timestamps. If legal asks, they'll say it's anecdotal, she said. So I'm giving you evidence. I stared at the paper and felt the strange pull of responsibility, the real kind, not the kind that sits in meetings. Who else has this? I asked. No one, Noor said, because they're scared. But you're not supposed to be scared. You're quality. Quality. Like I was a concept instead of a person. I gathered the papers. I'll bring it to Elaine. Noor's mouth tightened. Bring it or bury it. I didn't answer fast enough. That was my answer. Later that day, I presented Noor's evidence in a smaller meeting with Elaine and procurement. Procurement's director, Gavin, looked irritated as if we were accusing him personally. These kits meet standards, he said. They're approved vendors. They're cheaper, Noor said. She'd insisted on attending, which I had allowed because I still thought I was being brave. Gavin glared at her. Cost is not your lane. Elaine cut in smoothly. Let's focus on solutions. Solutions in leadership language means patches that don't admit the hole. We pause the kit change, Noor said. We notify units. Gavin said, if we pause, we admit the kits are defective. That triggers vendor action, documentation, maybe. Maybe what? Noor asked. Gavin didn't answer. He didn't need to. Elaine turned to me. What is your classification as of now? I felt my throat tighten. Preliminary, I said. Not confirmed. Elaine nodded. Then we do not overcorrect. We monitor, we reinforce sterile technique. We avoid dramatic moves during accreditation week. Noor stared at her. People are getting harmed. Elaine's voice stayed gentle. People always get harmed in hospitals. Our job is to reduce harm without destabilizing care. I watched Noor's face as the meaning landed. This place didn't need safety. It needed a story where safety was always in progress. After the meeting, Noor followed me into the hallway. Please, she said quietly, don't let them do this. I opened my mouth and felt two instincts collide, the urge to protect the hospital and the urge to protect the truth. I said, I'm trying. Noor's eyes hardened. Trying isn't an action. And then she walked away, leaving me alone with papers in my hand that suddenly felt heavier than they should have. That evening I stayed late, not because I was heroic, but because I couldn't bear to go home with the feeling of unfinished harm. The hospital after hours is a different creature. Lights dimmed, fewer voices. The hum louder because nothing competes with it. I sat at my desk and pulled up the procurement files for the central line kits. It took me longer than it should have. Not technically, politically. Some folders required permissions I didn't usually need. Some approvals had been routed through special projects. That phrase always meant someone wanted fewer eyes. When I finally opened the change request, my stomach dropped. My name was on it. Not as a decider, but as a reviewer. Months ago, procurement had sent a spreadsheet comparing vendors. Elaine had forwarded it to me with a note. Quick look, need by EOD. I remembered the day, a busy day, a dozen emails, a staff complaint about sink placement, a meeting about flu surge planning. I'd glanced at the spreadsheet and looked at the summary. Equivalent quality, cost savings. I'd clicked approve for clinical equivalence and moved on. I hadn't inspected drape size. I hadn't asked for bedside feedback. I hadn't imagined my approval would become the shield leadership used to justify delay. Now, if Noor's evidence was correct, the kit change wasn't just a procurement issue, it was a decision I'd helped legitimize. The twist wasn't that the hospital was hiding something. The twist was that I was already inside the thing being hidden. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my own digital signature like it belonged to someone else. No wonder Elaine wanted classifications routed through her. No wonder legal was careful with language. It wasn't only about accreditation. It was about responsibility landing in places that couldn't be allowed to crack. At 9:17 p.m., Elaine called me. She never called that late unless she needed something immediate. You're still there, she said, not a question. Yes, I replied, voice tight. She didn't waste time. We're getting inquiries. A family filed a complaint. It's escalating. I swallowed. We need to pause the kits. Elaine's silence was brief, but it felt like a door closing. We can't, she said. Why not? Because we can't prove it's the kits, she replied, and because procurement already executed the contract, and because, she hesitated, then added, because you signed the clinical equivalence review. The words landed like cold water. You knew, I said. I suspected, Elaine corrected. I checked after Noor started pushing. I was hoping we could handle it quietly. Quietly. Always quietly. Elaine continued, voice softer now, almost kind. Listen to me. If this becomes a vendor defect issue during accreditation, we fail, we lose funding, we lose staff, and patients suffer in ways you don't get to count on a dashboard. I stared at my screen. So we let patients suffer in ways we can count, I said, and heard the bitterness in my own voice. Elaine's tone sharpened. Don't get moral with me. I'm trying to keep this place alive. Alive. The institution, not the patient. Then she said the sentence that reframed everything. I need you to protect the hospital the way you protected the spreadsheet. I felt something inside me go still, because she was right about one thing. I had already done it once. The next day I tried to be a different version of myself. I told myself that awareness was change, that now that I understood my part in it, I could correct course. That one bad approval didn't make me complicit forever. I started drafting a formal escalation memo, careful language, precise data, Noor's evidence attached. I wrote it the way I wished the world worked, transparent, direct, ethically clean. Then I imagined the replies. Legal, unconfirmed. Procurement, approved vendor. Elaine. Timing, leadership, risk. Risk. Not patient risk, reputational risk, operational risk. I stared at my draft and felt the fatigue of pushing against a system built to absorb pressure without changing direction. Noor stopped by my office that afternoon. She didn't knock. She stood in the doorway like she had decided something. I filed an internal safety report, she said. It can't be deleted. It triggers automatic review. My pulse jumped. Noor, it's already done, she said. I felt two emotions at once, relief and panic. Relief, because someone else had forced motion. Panic, because motion means exposure, and exposure means leadership will tighten control. Elaine appeared in my doorway 10 minutes later. She moved like someone who had been summoned, not like someone who chose to come. Close the door, she said. I did. Elaine didn't sit. She paced once, then stopped, and looked at me with an expression that wasn't anger exactly. It was calculation under strain. Noor filed a report, she said. I know, I replied. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Did you encourage her? No, I said quickly. Too quickly. Elaine watched me. You're not as good at lying as you think. I didn't tell her to file it, I insisted. But she's right, we need external review. Elaine's mouth tightened. External review during accreditation is catastrophic. Patients are being harmed, I said, and heard how late it sounded. Elaine leaned toward me. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I'm enjoying this? Then she lowered her voice. Here's what's going to happen. Legal will classify the infections as present on admission until there's indisputable proof. Procurement will hold the line. Leadership will offer a corrective action plan that looks proactive but admits nothing. And Noor will be reassigned or isolated until she either quits or learns. I started. That's the system, Elaine cut in. You have two choices. You can be a spark that burns out and changes nothing. Or you can stay in the room and influence what comes next. Influence, that word again. It sounded like ethics with better branding. Elaine's tone softened. I'm not your enemy. The headlines are your enemy. The funding cuts are your enemy. The staff exodus is your enemy. If we destabilize this hospital, you don't get to feel righteous while beds close. She handed me a folder. Inside was a draft corrective action plan, already formatted, already polished. Training modules, reminders, audit schedules. No mention of kits. No mention of lot numbers. No mention of procurement. Elaine tapped the page. We need this signed by end of day. Your signature gives it legitimacy. My signature gives it cover, I said. Elaine held my gaze. Sometimes cover is the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing. I wanted to believe her. I wanted an answer that didn't cost me. So I did what I've always done when pressure comes. I tried to split the difference. I told Elaine I'd sign if procurement paused the next kit shipment. Elaine's eyes flickered. Tiny irritation. That's not your lane. No, I said quietly, but it's my conscience. Elaine studied me, then nodded once. I'll see what I can do. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. It was the kind of sentence that keeps you compliant because it feels like progress. After she left, I stared at the signature line on the corrective plan and told myself, if I sign, I stay inside the system. If I stay inside, I can push later, later. Later is how compromises become careers. I watched the clock. I rewrote the memo I'd drafted into softer language. I deleted Noor's name. I told myself I was protecting her, and I didn't notice how naturally that sounded. At 3:22 p.m., Noor sent me one sentence. Check the old cases. They did this before. I felt my stomach tighten because I knew she was right before I even opened the archive. Hospitals have memories. They're just not kept in one place. They live in closed files, in resolved complaints, in staff who transfer and never explain why. I searched the infection database by unit and timeline. The surgical step-down had a spike 2 years ago. Same classification language, same soft corrective plan, same conclusion. No definitive source identified. I opened the incident notes. The kit vendor was different then, but the pattern wasn't. The pattern was decision-making under threat. Protect reputation first, then manage the fallout quietly. I dug deeper, searching for the people involved. Elaine's name appeared in the administrative review of that case, not as the lead, but as an advisor. Martin from legal had signed off. Gavin from procurement was listed as consulted. The same circle, not a board, an inner circle. The people who stayed, the people who learned. I sat back, cold creeping up my arms. This wasn't a one-time moral stumble. This was a practiced institutional reflex. And then I found something worse, a staff note from that prior case, buried in an attachment. A nurse had raised concerns about a device change and was counseled on appropriate communication. Another staff member had filed a safety report and was redirected for professional development. No one wrote punished. They wrote redirected. I closed my eyes and heard Elaine's voice. Influence. Stay in the room. I realized the room was designed to turn people into furniture. My phone buzzed. Elaine. Need you in my office now. When I walked in, Martin from legal was already there. Camera calm, hands folded. Elaine didn't offer me a seat. Noor escalated outside the chain, Elaine said. She filed a safety report, I replied. That is the chain. Martin spoke, voice smooth. It's a reporting mechanism. It doesn't determine conclusions. Elaine added, it triggers attention. That's the point, I said. Elaine's face hardened. Attention is expensive. Martin slid a paper toward me, an updated classification summary with a highlighted line. Present on admission. It read. I stared. That's not accurate. Martin's tone stayed even. Accuracy requires confirmed causality. Elaine said, we are not calling it hospital-acquired until we have proof we can defend. I looked at them and felt something shift, a clarity that didn't feel like courage but like nausea. This isn't about proof, I said quietly. It's about protection. Elaine didn't deny it. That was the twist inside the twist, the honesty of her silence. Then she said, I need you to sign the classification summary. I felt my mouth go dry. What happens if I don't? I asked. Elaine's voice softened. Then you're not on this file anymore. Martin added, and Noor's report becomes the primary narrative. Elaine leaned in slightly. You care about Noor, right? You said you were protecting her. I felt heat rise in my face. They were offering me leverage disguised as compassion. If I signed, I stayed. I could buffer Noor. If I refused, I became irrelevant. and Noor would be alone against a machine. This is how systems recruit you. They make your morality into a tool they can pull. I stared at the pen on Elaine's desk like it was heavier than it was, and I realized the second truth Noor had been trying to hand me. It wasn't just that they'd done this before. It was that they had made it feel reasonable every time. I signed. Not fast, not with confidence, with the slow, deliberate motion of someone watching themselves cross a line and pretending the slowness makes it less real. Elaine didn't smile. She didn't thank me. She simply slid the signed page toward Martin. Like the action had been inevitable. Martin nodded once. Good, Elaine said. Now we stabilize. Stabilize. Like the patient hadn't been the one destabilized. Elaine opened another folder. Next, she said, as if this were a checklist. There was a new document, an accreditation readiness brief. It included a section on infection control performance, a chart with clean downward arrows, a narrative paragraph describing effective surveillance and rapid response. I looked at it and felt my stomach tighten. That chart is wrong, I said. Elaine's eyes stayed on me. It's preliminary. It's fiction, I corrected. Elaine lowered her voice. It's framing. Martin spoke again. This will be reviewed by surveyors. The story we tell matters. I heard Noor's voice in my head. Trying isn't an action. I imagined Noor finding out I'd signed. I imagined her face. Disappointment first, then something colder. Elaine leaned forward. Listen, Noor filed a report. That report will now be handled. She'll be reassigned temporarily. She'll be told it's for her well-being. She'll be monitored. Monitored, I repeated, my throat tight. Elaine's tone softened. If you stay cooperative, you can make sure she isn't crushed. This is how the point of no return feels. Not like a dramatic moment, but like a quiet exchange of control. I swallowed. Pause the kit shipments, I said. You promised you'd try. Elaine's eyes flickered. Annoyance, then calculation. Procurement will slow the next delivery, quietly, no alerts. It was a concession designed to keep me calm. A crumb of action I could hold up as proof I hadn't betrayed myself completely. Martin stood gathering papers. We'll classify pending cases the same way, until further notice. Until further notice. Until the story is safe. After they left, I sat in my office staring at my signature in the digital system, my name attached to a decision that would shape what the hospital admitted, what it denied, what it couldn't confirm. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, and it could not be undone. Even if I confessed later, the timeline would remain. The classification would live. The external disclosures would be shaped by what I had signed today. The institution would be protected. The patient would still be impaired. And Noor would learn what happens to people who try to force truth into a system that survives by filtering it. I opened my email and began rewriting Noor's safety report response into softer language. I removed a phrase that sounded accusatory. I adjusted another that implied urgency. I told myself I was doing it to keep her safe. And I didn't stop to ask whether safe had become another word for silent. The next week unfolded the way Elaine predicted. Smooth on the surface, brutal underneath. Noor was reassigned to special projects. That meant a desk, spreadsheets, and isolation. She stopped appearing on the unit. Nurses asked where she went. Leadership said, she's supporting accreditation prep. I watched people accept it because they were tired. The infection numbers, classified as present on admission, stayed off the official harm dashboard. The corrective plan went live. Posters, training reminders, a refresher module everyone clicked through while rolling their eyes, and the kit shipments slowed quietly, just enough to reduce new cases without admitting why. The patient's family requested a meeting. Elaine didn't attend. Martin did. I sat beside them, hands folded, listening to a mother speak with careful politeness that barely contained rage. "You're telling me this just happened?" she said, "that it wasn't preventable?" Martin replied with a voice that sounded compassionate because it was practiced. "We're saying the clinical picture was complex. We're committed to learning. Learning. Always learning. Never admitting." Afterward in the hallway, the mother looked directly at me. "Your quality," she said. "Are you telling me the truth?" My throat tightened. I could have said something honest, something that mattered. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry." She stared at me for a moment, then nodded as if she'd expected that. "I didn't ask for sorry," she said quietly. "I asked for true." That sentence followed me for days. Accreditation week arrived with fresh coffee stations and polished hallway signs. Leadership toured units with confident smiles. Staff wore their best competence. The surveyors asked questions and received answers that sounded precise because we had rehearsed them. On day 2, a surveyor asked about infection surveillance. Elaine answered easily. I stood behind her, holding a binder, watching my own work become a performance. Later, Noor cornered me near the stairwell. Her face was pale, controlled. "You signed?" she said. I didn't pretend not to know. I did. "Why?" she asked, voice flat. I wanted to say, "To protect you, to stay inside, to influence." But the words felt like excuses the moment I formed them. "I thought I could reduce harm," I said. Noor's mouth tightened. "By renaming it?" "It's complicated," I said, and heard how institutional I sounded. Noor nodded slowly. "That's the phrase they teach you. Complicated means no one is accountable." She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You're not in the inner circle because you're safe. You're in it because you're useful." Then she walked away. That night I went home and sat in my kitchen with the lights off, replaying the mother's question. "Are you telling me the truth?" I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to name before. The institution hadn't forced me. It had offered me belonging. And I had paid for it with a patient's reality. After the surveyors left, the hospital exhaled. People laughed again in hallways. Leadership sent congratulatory emails filled with words like excellence and resilience. Elaine stopped watching her phrasing so closely. Martin disappeared back into legal silence. The hum returned to normal. I thought that would make me feel relief. Instead, I felt exposed, because without the external threat, there was no urgent excuse for what I had done, no accreditation week to hide behind, no crisis narrative to justify compromise. Just my signature, sitting in a system that would outlast me. Noor never returned to the unit. She transferred to another hospital within a month. Her resignation email was polite and short. It thanked leadership for growth opportunities and said she was pursuing alignment with her values. Alignment. A word for leaving when staying requires surrender. Sometimes I picture her first day here, the way she carried policy like it mattered. I wonder what she tells people now about this place, or if she tells them anything at all. The patient remains on the long-term care list. Every time I see his name in follow-up reports, my stomach tightens. The harm is stable now, unchanging, permanent, quietly absorbed into the world like a new baseline. That is what my work does best. It turns disasters into baselines. At night, when the building quiets, I walk past the surgical units and listen to the steady chorus of machines. I watch staff move the way they always do. Efficient, focused, obedient to the rhythms of a system bigger than their individual morality. And I understand now what the inner circle really is. It isn't a room. It's an agreement, an unspoken contract that says, we will protect the institution first, because the institution is what keeps us employed, funded, respected, safe. It's easy to sign that contract when the stakes are abstract, when harm is a number, a category, a classification. It's harder when you're standing in front of a mother asking for the truth. I used to believe my job was to prevent harm. Now I know my job is to decide what the hospital can admit without changing. And once you learn how to do that, once you learn how to edit reality into something survivable, the system never stops offering you reasons. You can call it caution, you can call it discipline, you can call it sustainability, but it is still what it is. It is choosing the story over the person. And the most dangerous part is this: the hospital will keep humming, whether I confess or not. The institution doesn't need my conscience. It only needs my compliance, and I've already proven I can give it. If you enjoyed this story, you'll find more original stories on this channel. Like and subscribe to continue the journey, and I'll see you in the next one.